Hey everybody, this is Joe Pace with Ice Water Yoga, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 yoga poses that will help you develop strength in your body. And we're going to go through these pretty quickly, but I just want to let you know that yoga isn't just about getting flexible and stretching. It is a very strengthening practice if you allow it to be. We're going to cover some poses that are pretty general and cover the body in a lot of ways, so that it's not just addressing one part of the body, which is something we're really almost never doing in yoga. We're never really isolating muscles. We're thinking about muscle groups and using them together wisely. So the first one we're going to talk about is plank pose. And so just to keep it really simple, I want to give you the alignment and then talk about what it's doing for the body. So the hands are directly underneath the shoulders here, and think about the hand placement, because when we're doing plank pose, we're generally doing it for a little while, and we're often doing it for multiple times in a class. So your index fingers will be parallel to one another. So as opposed to having your fingers turn in towards one another, the index fingers become parallel, which allows your wrists to be parallel with the front of your mat, so you're not bringing pain and stress into your wrists. Spread your fingers as wide as you can, except for the thumb. The thumb is kind of special. Just find its own spot where it feels good for you, but every one of your 4 fingers spreads wide. Now you have the hands directly underneath the shoulders, spin your biceps forward, then step back into your plank. And so for plank, it's really requiring so much engagement in the front of your body and also the shoulders. So just holding this pose is a really awesome pose for building strength. If you can do this for a minute, you're pretty strong. So you're zipping your legs together, and from here you can do a few things just to make it a little bit more dynamic for you. You can draw big circles around your wrists, so rotate. This is a big shoulder strengthener and also a core stabilizer, making sure you go in both directions. Or you can make small circles, or you can rock the shoulders forward, coming onto the tiptoes, and you'll notice it's just by holding that and doing nothing else, there's a lot of strength there. And plank pose goes along with number 2 in our list, which is chaturanga. It's often called a yoga push-up, but actually it's a pose, and when you hold it as a pose, you learn why it's a pretty strengthening one. So usually we'll take this pose after a plank pose. So we'll start with a really nice plank. Hands are shoulders width, index fingers are parallel, fingers spread wide, and we'll start in that shoulders rocked forward position, because for chaturanga, we want to keep the elbows over the wrists and the shoulders at the same level as the elbows. So as opposed to letting the elbows drop below, the shoulders drop below the elbows and the elbows to drop back, this isn't good. As opposed to that, we keep the shoulders rocking forward, the elbows hugging in, and then my shoulders stay at elbow height, and my elbows stay just above the wrists. Try holding this for a minute. I don't know if I could even do that. Chaturanga is a really, really awesome strengthening pose because it's an isometric hold with mostly your triceps and your chest doing most of the work. But there's some bicep, there's some back, obviously core from what's going on in the plank part of the pose. So we've got the upper body and the core. Let's do the legs. Chair pose. So for chair, really simple one. You don't even have to go that far into it for it to be a really strong pose. Bring your feet together. You can have your hands at your hips or your arms overhead, and all you're doing is sitting down. That's it. Zip the legs together. Weight is primarily in your heels, so you can support an even lower sit, but keep the toes and the balls of the feet pressing against the mat. Don't lose that, but the majority of the weight is in your heels. Arms rise, and by keeping the weight in your heels, you allow yourself to come a little bit deeper. And now if you want to advance your chair and bring even more strengthening into it, there's a concept in yoga called Mula Bandha, and I'm going to tell you what the musculature is that you're engaging with that principle. Chair pose. You can even try this right now. Take your arms high. Sit down as low as you can support comfortably, but with a good amount of work going on as well. So you're pressing your legs together, and your 2 sit bones behind you, the 2 pointy parts of your butt, try to draw those together with the muscles between them. Feel the pose get lighter in your legs. So now you're engaging what's known as your pelvic floor. And now once you get the sit bones drawing together, see if you can draw your tailbone and your pubic bone towards one another with the muscles between them. So now you've activated your pelvic floor. This becomes much more of a pelvic floor pose than it does a leg pose. So I want to introduce this to you because it is actually a pretty advanced concept for yoga, but I think most people can actually do it. Okay, so try that out, feel the difference. It's a very, very strong support for a lot of things we do in yoga, and chair pose is a really great place to practice it. Another very strong leg pose is known as horse pose or goddess pose, and this is pose number 4. So for horse or goddess, the only thing you want to make sure you're doing is keeping your heels directly underneath your knees. You don't want to have your knees popping out past the heels, so keep the heels directly underneath the knees. You want your toes working towards, facing directly apart from one another, but they can be facing slightly forward, but you want them pointing out to some degree. From here, hands can be at the hips, arms can be overhead. So why I chose this pose, and as you can probably tell, there's a little bit of something extra with every one of these poses. What I like about this is you can do a few things. First, in the lower body. Once you have the pose set up, you can lower and lift, developing a functional range of motion in your hips, especially the adductor muscles, the inseams of your legs. Okay, so we've got an opportunity to come lower and higher in the legs, which starts to burn really quickly. But what's going on up in the upper body? We have basically a neutral upper half that we can do really anything we want with. So I like to take an eagle wrap. So you can just give yourself a bear hug. You can draw the back of the hands towards one another, or you can double wrap. So you can take the eagle arms. You can take a twist to the right with eagle arms or not. Twist either way. You can take a back bend or a forward fold, trying to keep the forward fold in the back, which feels really nice, as opposed to pitching forward in the hips. Feels really good there. Lift up, arms can come wide, and then you can lift the arms overhead as well. So a lot can happen in the arms. It's not just a lower body strengthening pose. Final one, locust pose. This one often gets skipped over if you're doing your own personal practice because nobody thinks it's fun. It's not glamorous. It's not a big back bend, but it's a contraction in the back that really supports everything we do in our lives. When we sit, we're bringing a lot of passive energy into our back. Locust pose makes the back a lot more active, allows us to sit taller, allows us to avoid a lot of pain and injury in the back. Simple. Lay down, prone position, laying down on your belly. Arms come wide, palms face down, zip your legs together. Chin can stay in towards the chest. You don't have to lift up in the neck. That often doesn't really feel that great. Lift up, hands, legs, and you're here, okay? So you can hold this one for up to a minute, maybe more, continuing to lift as high as you can in the legs, arms, and chest. If it feels accessible for you, of course we're gonna add something here. Bend the knees, grab the ankles. It becomes bow pose. And you'll notice bow is a deeper back bend and requires a lot of strength in the arms because you're pulling your knees towards the mat using your quad strength, lifting the heels towards the ceiling. So the lower body's getting a lot of work here while the chest is opening and the arms are gripping your ankles. You're developing grip strength. And then you can lower back to locust and then all the way to the mat. Okay, so those are my 5 favorite strengthening poses in yoga. I hope you enjoy them. Some of them are more fun than others. Strengthening is something that a lot of people tend to avoid. I think it's one of my favorite parts of yoga, just because, as I mentioned before, yoga doesn't tend to isolate muscles. It generally uses the whole body together. So enjoy the full body strengthening of yoga. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you come back for more. Thank you for your